Welcome back everyone to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to be talking about MIKA. We've made our way through the different characters in the different character archive, looking at all of them so far, and we've made our way down all the way to MIKA. Now talking about him first and foremost, when looking at him as a character, he's going to only really be helping a lot of physical characters. A lot of what he can do can increase attack speed, and he is a healer, so if he's your only healer on your account besides someone like Barbara, you could use him, and building him is not necessarily a terrible idea, but, if you don't really have a physical user, someone that you're trying to focus on, someone like Razor or another character, specifically like Eula or whatever that I use in this team, then Mika's gonna kind of not be as useful for you. You could do some fun team comps that I've seen, making Ayato just do a lot quicker. Someone like Rift, who is one of my friends and we make a channel together, he's gonna be somebody that also uses MIKA with Ayato just purely for fun attack speed increases, and you could do that with plenty of other characters, but in general, his best way of where he's going to fit on teams is going to be for physical units as the main damage dealer, specifically talking about Eula. Now, going a little bit further beyond this though, let's go ahead and talk about his talents. His normal attack talent doesn't need to be leveled at all. He doesn't do anything with it. The only thing that you're going to be using is the skill and the burst. And because of how you're going to use them, especially when it comes into passive talents and everything later, and even constellations, using these skills and the burst is probably going to be best when used together. So leveling these at the same level consistently as you increase is going to be better for you as well. So let's go ahead and look into his skill. His skill is basically going to use a crossbow. Even though he's a polearm character, he'll use a crossbow to then hit an opponent as well, and then put the entire party members in the Soulwind state. Now, when characters in the Soulwind state are on the field, their attack speed will be increased, and that's what I was talking about when using Ayato or whatever. The on-field character's attack speed will be increased. And you can look at level 7, we have an attack speed bonus of 19%, and as you can see, with each level, it about increases by 1%. So, keeping that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the different versions, the tap and the hold version. This is going to be a little bit more useful later, but just to know what they are first and foremost here, the tap version fires a flow frost arrow that can pierce through opponents, dealing cryo damage to enemies it comes into contact with. So just a simple, cryo arrow that just goes and hits an opponent. The hold version goes into an aiming mode, and then as soon as you lock onto a target, it fires a rhyme star flare at them, dealing cryo damage, and then it will rise up after it hits them before it explodes and launches 3 rhyme star shards into a maximum of 3 other opponents nearby, dealing cryo damage to them. So those interesting different things right here in the first and foremost, you're really not gonna, it doesn't really matter too much until we get into passives about using the tap or the hold version, but once again, as we get into some later passive talents as well as constellations, that can change. Let's go ahead and look at the burst next. This is where you're going to be getting your healing from, and that's why this is going to be extremely useful to upgrade. Really more or less the idea for the skill is just for, I guess, some more damage, but this is all based off attack percent. The main way that you're trying to build MIKA though is through full-blown HP for healing, and his attack speed bonus, that's really why you want to level this specific skill here. Really no other reason besides just mainly going for the attack speed bonus. Also, if you really want to, you could just not really level into it too heavily, but personally I am. But the burst, on the other hand, is the thing that you're going to want to focus into the most, and if you want, the only thing that you can focus into. The biggest thing that it does here is it's going to be regenerating HP for all nearby party members as soon as you use it, so a party-wide heal as soon as he uses it. Now, the Eagle Plume states that when the normal attacks of active characters affected by Eagle Plume hit an opponent, MIKA will heal them to regenerate HP based on his max HP. Characters affected by this state can only regenerate HP in this way once per short interval of time. And as you can see here, that interval is going to be 2.5 seconds. As you increase level, that does not change. But as we get once again into constellations and whatnot, that does change. Looking here though, you can see that he has a little bit of a higher energy cost. It's quite not 80 or 90, but it's not something low like 60. So 70 is kind of that middle of the range area, but it is still on the higher end. So going into HP percent and energy recharge is really the way that you're going to try to build him. So as you do this party-wide healing, you're then going to go into doing the little bits of healing, which is less amounts of healing, but it is going to be on certain intervals that you can get, and it'll be able to heal your active character as they're doing normal attacks and getting their damage out, especially your on-field characters, for instance, your damage dealers that are usually taking most of the brunt force of those hits anyways. Looking at some passive talents that are going to be extremely useful for you though, the passive talent Suppressive Barrage. Basically, as soon as you go into the Soul Wind state used by your skill, you're then going to get these detector effect stacks, and then at that point you can get physical damage bonus based off of it. If you use just the tap version of the skill, you'll get a Flow Frost Arrow, which we've already talked about, and if it hits more than one opponent, each additional opponent you'll get gets a detector stack. And then as soon as you use the Rhyme Star Shard, which is the hold version of the skill, then you'll hit an opponent, it will then generate one detector stack, and then each Rhyme Star Shard can trigger the effect one time that it happens, so each of those 3 hits, meaning you can get 3 detector stacks as well. Now, the maximum amount of stacks you can get is 3, so basically what you can get here is a 30% physical damage bonus buff here. Honestly, that's just extremely good, especially once again, just goes into why he's going to be extremely useful for physical focused characters. Now, also when looking at this, let's look at the second passive talent. This states that if you have the Skyfeather Song Eagle Plume, which is the ultimate, you're getting that Eagle Plume on them, that healing while they're getting, constantly getting healed by doing their normal attacks, and you have the Soul Wind state on them from the skill, whether it's a tap or a hold, at the same time, and they score a crit hit with one of their attacks, that being the on-field character that has both of these buffs on them, Soul Wind state will actually grant them 1 stack of the detector stacks from the Suppressive Barrage passive talent that we just talked about. During a single instance of Soul Wind, this 1 detector stack can be gained only 1 time in that specific manner. Additionally, on top of that, the maximum number of stacks that you can get gained through the Soul Wind state alone is increased by 1, so that means that you're at a 40% physical damage bonus increase. Going ahead and looking beyond what you're looking at here, as we've seen, you're going full-blown into HP percent and energy recharge. So talking about weapons, there's a bunch of different weapons that he can honestly use, and that's really what we see a lot with these types of characters. For MIKA, for instance, even with Favonius Lance, it's going to be an extremely good weapon for you. Getting this to high refinements is going to help your crit hits a little bit easier to get more particles for the entire team, as well as himself. Going for an energy recharge, main style weapon is extremely good for him. As we talked about, HP percent and ER are going to be extremely useful for him to use. Now, some other weapons you could use if you don't have a Favonius Lance, an extra one laying around, you could go ahead and use one of the event weapons, Dialogues of the Desert Sages. Now, this weapon has a main set of HP percent, so you're probably going to change your artifacts a little bit around to make sure you have enough energy recharge, but also the ability states that if you perform healing on a character, which we see it happens about every 2.5 seconds, he'll restore 16 energy. But caveat with that is that this effect can only be triggered once every 10 seconds. At the end of the day, really, you're getting an extra 16 energy from doing basically just healing, which honestly, in my personal opinion, is extremely good for him. The already attacks and constant help that he can get with multiple cryo characters on the team is already probably going to be enough anyways for him. But I think getting the extra energy isn't necessarily a problem either. Already keeping a high energy recharge, giving him more energy, is going to be extremely good for him. Now, this is at R5, and if you did do the event, then you should have this at R5. I'm pretty sure this one's an event weapon as well. I know I've made a mistake not too long ago on a different video, but this is also an event weapon. I'm like 99% sure of it this time. Another weapon that you could use is something like the Catch. I wouldn't necessarily highly recommend it. The really only reason you'd go for it is just for the main stat of energy recharge. You don't care about, obviously, his own elemental burst damage because he doesn't do any real burst damage necessarily, or you don't really care about it anyways when it does, and you don't care about necessarily a crit on it either. So it's just more or less extra damage and higher damage at that when you're trying to crit more. So this is more or less a damage characters type focus, which is why it's on Xiangling or Raiden usually. A 5-star weapon if you have it, and once again, don't have a Favonius Lance, don't have any Dialogue C. If you don't have any of these different weapons that are really good for him, you could throw on an Engulfing Lightning. I would not recommend this at all, especially if you have Raiden or Xiangling or something that you already have it on. It's, once again, got a nice main stat of energy recharge, and it's a little bit higher than what you would see in the Catch. It's about 10% higher, which is nice. But honestly, you're just increasing your attack for how much energy you have, and really that's not necessary. And it does give you more energy recharge after you use a burst, but once again, for other characters, especially characters like Raiden, are going to want that more, considering that's her personal weapon. At the end of the day, though, I think his best weapon is going to be Favonius Lance. Backing that up, and honestly on par with it, is Dialogues of the Desert Sages if you have the weapon as well. Going a little bit further, let's go ahead and talk about artifacts. Now, the main set that you're going to want to use is Noblesse Oblige. Once again, you don't really care about the 2-piece increasing elemental burst damage. Most characters that are using this set really only care about the 4-piece. It states that using an elemental burst increases all party members' attack by 20% for 12 seconds. Considering when using the burst and everything, you have a certain cooldown, it fits about in the same amount of time. So that should be extremely useful for you, especially when you're using a burst and then a skill, to make sure that you're getting both of those stacks up for those passive talents that you have. This set is going to be very nice, so going with this set's not going to be a problem. But if you're sitting there going, well, I don't have a good Noblesse Oblige set, or if you already have it and it's on Bennett or Diona or something, and you're kind of already using it on a different character or a different set, you could go for something like Ocean Hued Clam. It's not necessarily a terrible choice to go for a 4-piece set. Usually most of the time that's your basic set that you'll go for healer routes. So you could go for that. It kind of goes on the less buffing route, and it goes for a little bit more on the healing route with the 2-piece. And then it also increases or just extra damage from the 4-piece as well, giving that big 90% extra damage hit whenever you do a certain amount of healing, and it takes 90% of that and does it as a physical damage hit. I also see here that people do like a tenacity combo with emblem as well. I understand people are trying to do the tenacity. If you don't have a 4-piece set, then you can do this, going for just a 2-piece of HP percent on Vurakaash's Glow or tenacity of the Millilith as shown on the actual stats here. Then you can go for that. And then also the reason why people are doing a 2-piece emblem usually combined with that is just because keeping energy high on him is going to be kind of a must. So if you don't have these 4-piece sets, specifically if you don't have Noblesse Oblige, I do agree with this. This is kind of the ranking that I would go in. Ocean Clem is nice, but honestly, especially for MIKA, it's not going to really be high up there compared to some other characters. Looking at main stats you're going to want to use though, it really does depend on what you really need. In my personal opinion, you're going to want to go for an energy recharge sands, an HP percent goblet, and then a circlet with healing bonus as the main stat. And on the substats, you're going to be looking for energy recharge and HP percent where you can find it, and looking for flat HP where you can find it as well. Looking for really these two substats is going to be best for you, and then obviously looking for flat HP as the third stat, if anything, to get it. If you do have a different weapon though, for instance, if you have Favonius Lance, this usually does mean that you're trying to go for a crit rate circlet in this kind of way, but I don't care too much about getting so many particles off of him for my party members. With my other characters, I have enough energy coming out of my other characters, but if you want, you could go for an energy recharge sands to make sure you're getting enough energy recharge, and then going for a crit rate circlet instead of a healing bonus. Your healing is going to be less, but if your characters are able to survive long enough, then that can be good for you. But personally for me, I'd rather go for the healing bonus because I pair this team with someone like Farina who decreases HP. With this team, this is going to be something that he can use, and I would say those are the main stats you're going to look for, as well as the substats going to HP percent and ER. Now, if you have enough energy recharge outside of this sands, you could just go HP percent healing bonus, or, HP percent crit rate. But, it really just depends, making sure you have enough energy with him. Personally, for me, I like to be around the 200 range with him as well. And then once I actually level him up, he should be around the 40 to 50% crit rate range. So I'll be fine when actually looking at that. But honestly, looking here at the 200 plus energy recharge, that's kind of where you want to be. He doesn't need a lot of it, but he does help a lot of his teammates make sure they have it, especially characters that kind of are burst necessary. So having those characters is going to be nice, and then pair with other characters that can have a lot of energy, help, and needs is going to be nice as well. Going on to talk about Constellations though, there's a few different ones that are going to be pretty good. Now, I know a lot of people, if you're really focusing on trying to get MIKA, you're probably just having him just as a fun factor. Most people aren't going to be building him just because he's cracked, because he's really not. A lot of people were hoping that he was going to be the Bennett to physical teams, and to an extent, he kind of is, but you have to use him even in a specific way. It doesn't necessarily make the teams extremely good. And the reason why is because the teams in Genshin really focus a lot on elemental reactions. So even stuff like superconduct and whatever can be a little bit of a problem. But even still, looking at the constellations, the first constellation states that the soul wind state of the skill can decrease the healing interval between the instances caused by the burst state, which means that as you're healing, you're basically going to be healing, a little bit quicker and more consistent, which is probably going to be helping a lot of teams, especially, once again, if you are running the team with a Farina or somebody who's decreasing HP, or if your character is just getting hit a lot, then that can really be useful for you as well. Getting heals more consistently is nice. Now, the second constellation states that when the skill's Flow Frost Arrow, which is the tap version, first hits an opponent, or its Rhymestar Flare hits an opponent, which is the hold version, one detector stack from the passive talent Suppressive Barrage will be generated, which means you're getting another stack, which is just allowing this C2 to just give you more stacks quicker at that point in time for trying to get to the maximum of 4 at this point. So it allows you to get to 4 extremely quickly, which I think is extremely good when looking at this constellation. It's a very nice constellation, and it kind of helps you just get more of those detector stacks when you're really looking at that passive talent. Now C3 and C5 increase the level of the burst and the skill by 3 respectively, and then the C4 states that when Mika's own Skyfeather Song's Eagle Plume state, which is from the burst, heals party members, this will restore 3 energy to Mika. This helps a lot more with energy needs and restoration ideas, and then this form of energy restoration can occur 5 times, which is probably about how many times, especially once getting to your early constellations that are kind of changing how fast you're getting things, allowing things, especially right here, healing more often. You'll actually be able to get 5 times during that, which is going to be able to give you 15 energy. And if you can compare that and combine that with the R5 of the Dialogue's weapon, then that allows you to have about 31 energy just from using your burst and whatnot. So that's going to be extremely good for you. So honestly, I would say that's a good constellation. If you can have it, that's great. Once again, most of these constellations, most people aren't going to be gunning for, whereas some other characters like, a C6 Farazan or a C6 Kuchosara, people are actually putting wishes into a banner for. Most of the time, though, these are just going to be things that are kind of nice for you, so that's why I'm going over them. The C6 states that the maximum number of detector stacks that the skill's Soul Wind state can gain is increased by 1. And then additionally, active characters affected by Soul Wind will deal 60% more physical crit damage as well. He's kind of almost has a C6 Kujosara idea to him already, where he kind of gives extra crit damage based on another part of his kit or whatever. So he has a very similar idea here. The problem, once again, is that at least with Kujosara, she can work extremely good with a character that's very much in the meta, which is Raiden, and even some other characters as well that could use it, Cyno and other Electro characters. So with that, it's a little bit easier to go for, whereas physical crit damage isn't really something that people are going too heavy into. But considering someone like Eula can use this, or someone once again like Razor can use it, this isn't going to necessarily be a bad idea to go for in constellations if you have it as well. I wouldn't necessarily say to really go for any of these constellations if you really want to build your Mika. He sits fine at C0. He's not going to be able to change your account, but he's going to make something a little bit more fun and can allow some of your physical characters to do more damage. Let's talk about the teams that Mika is going to be useful for. Obviously, he's going to be the support healer idea for physical focused characters. So characters like Eula and even characters like Razor down here as well. Characters that you're trying to get big physical hits in here. Another character you could use when looking at these teams is someone like Xinyan. She is, another physical usage character as well. Going for like a full 4-person team on 4 stars, that could be something you could do. But most of the time, you're going to be using him with Eula, or especially probably one of his best characters to go with, or someone like Razor. Now, the reason why this team is extremely good, never mind are you getting so much cryo instances from different characters, which is allowing the passive to be, a little bit higher triggered. Once again, if they are frozen or affected by cryo, you get an extra crit rate increase, which is going to help your other characters and your damage dealers to allow to go more into crit damage and not focus too much into the crit rate aspect of things. So keeping in mind, this is extremely nice to look at when looking at the, resonance. So pairing him with another cryo unit is going to be very good for him. Not only just for him, but honestly mainly your main damage dealer. Now, looking at a character in a team like this, Shenhe is increasing, just extra damage for Eula, as well as she's increasing damage from using her burst, so that's also kind of nice. She gives a physical resistance to enemies that are in the burst. Furina is obviously helping freeze here, which when you freeze an enemy, and then you hit it with a Claymore character, which Eula is, it creates the Shatter effect, which does more physical damage technically. So all these things in general is helping Eula just do more damage. Never mind, Furina just gives a great buff. And because, Furina makes all healers when she came out just better naturally, then Mika kind of got, it's not much, but he kind of got a buff. So here, being able to be used in this specific team actually gives him more purpose as well in this team as well, and makes it just a little bit better. At this point, you're just really banking on Furina's buff combined with Shenhe, and this is a very expensive team already, even looking in someone like Mika who has multiple constellations already into him. So if you really were looking for another team to really go for, you could just go for another, once again, talking about Razor or Xinyan, just looking for one of those teams. And honestly, a character like Rosaria isn't necessarily a terrible idea to throw as a character into. So this isn't necessarily a bad idea. And if you really need another character just for help, you could go for someone like Kuki or whatever, either for extra heals or just constant superconduct. Superconduct is nice because of the reaction to help physical damage increase. So that's also something that's nice to see. Seeing that happening, that's why he's also pretty good to be paired with an Electro main unit as well. But once again, you can see I still kind of use the idea of going for the double cryo to help your main damage dealer get more crit rate. But that being said, once again, I think that honestly his best team is going to be paired with Eula. And once again, as I was talking about, characters like Shenhe are going to be extremely useful for you. You're banking a lot on Furina's buffing here, and that kind of does pair well with what Mika is doing. He's constantly healing most of the time through what he's doing. He doesn't have too much of a downtime, especially, I think he only has like a 3-second downtime, so his heals are constantly there. Even though Furina's dropping HP, Mika should be increasing your HP while doing so, while also their normal attacks, your on-fielders, Eula is going to be healing herself as well, giving more stacks to Furina quicker. So this team's just extremely good, and that's why I like it. But besides that, there's not too many teams you're really going to be running Mika outside of that, unless you just have a team in general. He is a healer, so if you want to use him on just anyone and everyone, and you don't have anybody else, that can work as well. Well, that's everything I've got talking about Mika, looking at everything he has to offer. And although a lot of people kind of gave him a lot of hate, and I wasn't extremely excited when he finally came out at what he could do for physical, he did have some offers, and especially through time, can make some interesting teams and some fun teams to just run around with. So if you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Let me know if you guys have Mika, if you've built him, if he's stayed, at level 1 on your account forever, and if he forever will, that's cool too. Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.